So good afternoon and welcome once again to everyone attending in person and also to those online. So I am Andy Cohen, the director of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology Institute for Advanced Study, and I'm delighted to host this third in a series of 4 lectures, Stories of Creativity, organized for the IAS by Mr. Wallace Chan. At our previous 2 meetings, I gave a very brief introduction to the IAS and our interest in creativity in all of its manifestations, not just in the sciences, technology, business, but also the fine and performing arts. I also gave a short biography of Mr. Chan. I will not repeat all of that here just to save time, but I don't want to skip over some of the more salient aspects of Mr. Chan's personal journey. Mr. Wallace Chan, Chen Shiyin Xiansheng, is an internationally renowned artist known especially for his exceptional work and innovations in the crafting of jewelry, and as we learned at the last lecture in this series, in sculpture as well. He became a gemstone carving apprentice at the age of 16. Excuse me, and in the 5 decades since then, his curiosity and creativity have led to many innovations, such as the Wallace cut and the Wallace Chan porcelain, along with the crafting of many important pieces of fine jewelry and sculpture. His work has been exhibited in many of the world's most prominent art fairs, and his pieces are in the permanent collections of many museums, including the British Museum and the Capital Museum of China. Today, we continue our stories of creativity with an introduction by Wallace, followed by a presentation by Dr. Emily STOEHRER. Now, I will warn you in advance that Dr. STOEHRER is in Boston, where it is currently just after 4 a.m., so she will not be joining us in person, but we will have a recorded presentation by her. Following her presentation, Wallace will join us live for a question and answer session. But let me give a brief introduction to Dr. STOEHRER. Emily is a Boston-based curator, author, and educator who works at the intersection of fashion and jewelry. She has studied psychology, fashion, and textiles, and received her PhD in humanities from Salve Regina University. As the Rita J. Kaplan and Susan B. Kaplan Curator of Jewelry at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, Dr. STOEHRER oversees a collection that spans 9 curatorial departments and 6,000 years of history. She has curated exhibitions and written extensively on all aspects of adornment, including Past is Present, Revival Jewelry, Boston-made arts and crafts, jewelry and metalwork, and Hollywood Glamour, Fashion and Jewelry from the Silver Screen. Dr. STOEHRER recently contributed an essay in Wallace Chan's latest book, Winged Beauty, the Butterflied Jewelry of Art of Wallace Chan. In addition to her work as a curator, Dr. STOEHRER has spent more than a decade as an adjunct professor at Boston area colleges, and she has also served on the board of directors of North American Goldsmiths and is currently the spokesperson of the jewelry vetting committee of all 3 of the European fine art fairs. We're delighted that she is able to join us today, even if only virtually through a recording. She will speak on materials and creativity. We'll begin today with an introduction to the topic by Wallace, followed by Emily's recorded presentation, and then Wallace will rejoin us for a question and answer from the audience. So with that, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Wallace Chan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's lecture, Materials and Creativity. Often we refer to materials as the opposite of what is spiritual. But the more I create, the more I realize that in the world of creativity, everything is material. Material refers not just to the physical object that you can touch, see, and create with, but also to the feelings, stories, and ideas that an artist can work with and give form to. And all of these, physical and otherwise, can be the embodiment of representation of something spiritual, something beyond our physical existence, and realized. People often ask me if I have a favorite gemstone or metal. I don't. As a creator, the more materials I have and the more materials I love, the freer I become. I believe the overall beauty is not in a single material, but in how we find the harmony of different materials. To create a piece, it is important to look at how materials relate to one another. I began as a gemstone carving apprentice in 1973. In the workshop, we worked mostly with malachite, jade, and coral, and we focused on imitating traditional Chinese motifs. One of my most important tasks was to carve imperial seal marks from, for example, the Qing dynasty. It was a time when Chinese artifacts, even just the copies of them, were popular items in the Western households. After 9 months in the workshop, I quit. I decided that I had to answer the yearning in my heart. But I did not know what the yearning was at the time. But I knew that I could not spend years in a workshop doing repetitive tasks. I want more, and I still want more every single day. I started working on my own. I set up my own workshop in 1974 when I was 17 years old. It was just a floating table with 2 chairs set up by the fire escape in the building in which I lived. I set up the workspace every morning after all my neighbors had gone to work, and removed it every evening before they got home. There was Hong Kong in the 70s. The rules were loose, and that was the best I could do. As a beginner in the gemstone carving industry, I had no access to materials. I begged my parents to give me a loan of 1,000 Hong Kong dollars and spent more than half of it on a machine and the rest on 2 pieces of malachite. I carved the 2 pieces of malachite into Chinese fairies. When I completed the carving, I took the piece with me. And on a hot summer's day, I worked from street to street, locking on many doors. In the end, after 2 days of long walks, someone bought the pieces from me out of kindness. With the few hundred Hong Kong dollars I received, I bought a few more stones to work on. For the first 10 years in my creative journey, I worked mainly with opaque stones. I studied Chinese motifs. Then one day, the son of a client who had just returned to Hong Kong from overseas asked me whether I knew how to carve a cameo. What is a cameo? I asked. Of course, I had no idea. He sold me a $1 Hong Kong coin and told me that cameos like that were hugely popular in Japan. I looked at the $1 coin and told him I could do it. He gave me 2 pieces of turquoise to try it. I figured out how to carve them, but polishing them was a problem. The 2 pieces of turquoise cracked. Luckily, he convinced his father to give me more stone and let me try it again. I grew up in an underprivileged environment. My family struggled to make ends meet. My experience as a working child taught me that I have to be open to opportunities. Everything was about survival. By saying yes to a new idea, a new material, I create a whole new world for myself. One day, I got a call from this client. Wallace, you have to come to our shop now. Come as soon as possible. I have no idea what was up. I was living in Macau at that time, so I got the earliest and cheapest ferry ticket to Hong Kong. When I arrived, I saw that all the cameos I had made, which my client had already sold in Japan, had been returned to the shop. My heart dropped. Perhaps they didn't like my carvings. But the strange thing was that I felt very welcome at the shop. The staff gave me pineapple buns and orange juice. It seems that like VIP treatment. I had never felt so important. It turned out that the Japanese clients loved my piece and wanted me to sign my name on each of them. After making the cameos, I continued to explore. I began working with crystal because I was fascinated by the properties of light and what it can do inside a transparent crystal body. I discovered Michelangelo, and his works inspired me to explore Western sculpture. The drama, the movement, the tension. I was in my 20s, and the world was a wonder. I was always thirsty for more knowledge, more ideas, more materials. I learned about integral. In 1987, I invented the Wallace cut, an illusionary carving technique that combines faceting and three-dimensional integral. We talked about the Wallace cut in the first lecture, so I won't go into details here. After the Wallace cut came jade, precious stones, steel, copper, titanium, porcelain, and more. My quest for materials continues. As an artist, I create, but I also collect. I have collected a lot of things over the years. Gemstones, antique weapons, glasses, paintings, etchings, and even teapots, lots of teapots. I'm a material person, but it is not the sense of ownership I crave. It is the possibilities of connecting with the past that I desire. Through these so-called material things, I can connect to their makers and history, and understand the time they experienced and the life they live. To me, they are my gateway to the grand unknown past. There are many different kinds of teapots in Chinese tea culture, but the purple clay teapot is among the most celebrated. I collected my first purple clay teapots at an exhibition. I was fascinated by its elegance and wanted to take it home and study it. But it would cost 3 months' salary at that time. I wandered around the exhibition for 3 days. I could feel that even the exhibitors were tired of seeing me. A young, curious fellow with no money and lots of questions. On the last day of the exhibition, I decided that I had to buy it and take it home, even though it meant emptying my wallet. I was extremely happy to have the teapot in my hands. I wanted to make some tea with it to find out how the tea and the teapot would interact. Would it have a different taste? Would it have a different scent? I could not wait to try it. But I had no experience brewing tea with a purple clay teapot. I poured boiling water into it, and it cracked upon first use. Before I had my first cup of tea, the teapot was broken. My heart was broken, and I was broke. I kept the lid as a souvenir. Some years later, I turned the lid into this ring. Yes, the lid is a piece of material, but what makes the lid a green piece of material is the feeling and thought that came from my breaking the teapot. In every broken dream are more dreams. The broken pieces of your dreams can always be turned into something different, just as beautiful as the original. I like to think that when a dream breaks into pieces, it multiplies. I would say that there are no better matters than failures, heartbreaks, and broken dreams. The butterflies had meant a lot to me throughout my life. When I first saw butterflies as a child, I didn't know that these butterfly creatures were called butterflies. I asked my mother, "What are these flying colors?" Since then, butterflies have always been flying colors in my eyes. When I got older, I saw the butterfly lovers for the first time, and I cried my eyes out. How could two people so in love not be together? In one sense, two butterflies fly out from their lover's grave. That gave me a little comfort. And I regarded butterflies as the symbol of undying love. As I grew older, Taoist philosophers, in particular the butterfly dream, had a lasting effect on me. That is a famous story in an Asian text by Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi. From that, I find that life is but a dream. Only the moment here and now is real. What makes a dream so special? It is probably the idea that you dream only of faces you have seen. A dream is never entirely fictional, just as fiction is never entirely fictional. There are always an elements of reality that comes into play. I wonder if I could highlight the elements of reality in a dream and make it transcend the physical world. I have made at least a few hundred different versions of butterflies. Among them are the butterflies in a special project titled Forever Dancing. What I want to do with this project was to transform the wings of a real but dead butterflies into a piece of jewelry. So I started looking at the real butterfly specimens. They were sturdy, well preserved, and scientific, but deaf, quiet, and boring. Butterflies, even dead ones, must be alive. They need the sun, wind, music, movement, the colors of spring, and lots of love. So I began my quest to bring them back to life. Everything is difficult, but nothing is impossible. However, as sturdy as specimens might look in a frame, they feel a part in my fingertips. The butterfly's colors and patterns that we see on a butterfly's wing come from tiny powdery scales that rubbed off easily. It took me 3 years and countless attempts. I create work that set real butterflies' wings in between crystals and mother of pearl, using titanium as their structure. To retain the original colors and patterns of the butterfly wings, I have to be so careful that in my imagination, it was as if I were a doctor operating on a patient. Light is important, but shadows plays a part too. For that, my experience as a carver came in handy. I carved pathway for the light so that when it reached the surface of the crystal or titanium, it will encounter more opportunities for reflection, which delayed its movement and made it linger. Although, through carving, I created an uneven surface where shadows would provide contrast to the light, lending the piece more dimensions, and therefore more movement, even though it was not moving. The arrangement of the gemstones is also key. When I want to create movement, I think about how the colors will move. If you place green and red together, or yellow and blue, the colors jump from one to the other. You do this when you want drama, excitement, or tension. But green comes in many shapes, as does red, blue, and every color. When I want to express a subtle, gentle, natural movement, such as the careless of wind, I laid out the shape carefully and construct a color gradient. It takes quite a bit of time, but that is how I generate life in a form that no longer lives. There were times when I thought of abandoning my project, and times when I paid too close attention to voices in my head, both real and imaginary, that told me my efforts were pointless and silly, that what I wanted to do could not be done. But then I remembered that all butterflies were once caterpillars. I would go back to my dreams, back to my truth, and would see the butterfly rising, fluttering about, dancing in love and light. How they could possibly leave the wings alone, so thrilled and lifeless? A caterpillar, once pushed through time, with all its strength to make such beauty happen. I wanted to prolong the story so that could be passed on from generation to generation. And the only way I could do that was by becoming part of the story. I have been told that I was not the first to make butterflies. That is a motif that has long existed in the history of jewelry and art, and that I should not waste time on what has already been done by others. There are always people who tell you not to do something because no one has succeeded before. And at the same time, there are always people who tell you not to do something because someone had already done it. If you want to create, you cannot listen to others. You are responsible for your own art. And if you want to create a piece of jewelry with real butterfly wings, you are responsible to the caterpillar that made it happen. It is a piece of dear, precious life, and you must honor it. And this is probably the most important message I would like to convey in this lecture. It is always about honoring the materials, be it a stone, a teapot, a fragment of memory, the wings of dead butterfly, or your own existence. Now, I will pass the microphone to our guest speaker, my dear friend, Emily, a jewelry curator from Boston Museum of Fine Arts, who is joining us from Boston. Thank you, Professor Cohen.
Thank you so much for having me. This is my first time giving a lecture in this format, and it's both strange and exciting. I'm here virtually to tell you that physical objects matter. How do technology and creativity combine within a museum context? Let's start with an example. This necklace looks so modern, doesn't it? The vivid blue color, the simplicity of form, its sculptural texture, it looks like contemporary art. How old do you think this necklace is? Nearly 4,000 years ago, adding this blue glaze over rock crystal was not easy, but it was seen as meaningful and worth the time and effort it required to learn how to harness the powers that this gemstone held and to use the glaze to simultaneously create beauty and capture the spirit of the materials. Rock crystal is often found in the same veins that hold gold, and to the ancient Nubians, they awarded it a similar power to gold in their culture. It's often said that necessity is the mother of invention, and sometimes it is, but not always. A statement like that doesn't account for imagination. Sometimes creating ingenuity, new technology is not driven by need, but rather by possibility. I want to share a few examples from the MFA collection with you, and then explore how Mr. Chan's work fits into this age-old question of embracing or creating the new. In this case, and in Mr. Chan's work, artistry is driven by the desire to figure it out, the unwillingness to accept that just because it's never been done before means it's impossible. The same was true here. When this was uncovered, it was part of an excavation in what is today the Sudan. It was discovered not far from a workshop where the beads were made. Scattered among the floor of the space were many unsuccessful attempts to create this process. As a curator, my job is to build a collection of jewelry, care for the objects in that collection, and plan exhibitions, and otherwise publicize the collection to create interest, share information, and offer beauty to the museum's visitors and other audiences like you. Doing that is a creative practice. It's also a work in progress. I'm forever learning new things about the objects in the collection. Often, the curator is positioned as a lone genius behind an exhibition project, when in reality, we're part of a team that includes conservators, collections care staff, mount makers, exhibition designers, graphic designers, and many others. Here are just a few of the things done behind the scenes to care for the collection. On the left, storage. Each object is numbered and custom boxes are made to limit object handling and make tracking movements easier. When works are put on view, mount makers fabricate custom mounts to safely hold jewelry in place, and conservators oversee the care throughout, also cleaning and undertaking treatments to stabilize these objects. Each project is conceived of with an exhibition designer who works alongside the curator to create the space, while graphic designers create the visuals, and we all come together physically to put things together in the museum space. Today, I would like to think about the way works come into a collection and the way works of art come alive in the museum space. There are many different approaches to take here. For jewelry in particular, you can think about it as a decorative art alongside furniture, ceramics, and other objects. You can consider it from a materials perspective, for example, with a focus on metals, or focus on how jewelry is worn. For me, it's impossible to separate the jewel and how it was meant to be worn, how it was designed to move in the world, how it was seen and thought about by the designer, the wearer, and anyone who came in contact with it. This adds a layer of challenge in the museum context, where objects are devoid of the necessary body. This is where storytelling becomes key to helping people understand the creative context in which the jewelry was designed, crafted, and consumed. Let's focus on that. How it's made, how it's worn, and how it's understood. For the artist, sometimes they see something and are amazed, driven to know more, to really understand an idea or a process. That was the case for Alessandro Castellani when, as a young boy, he traveled with his father to archaeological sites in Tuscany outside Rome and witnessed firsthand the mastery his ancestors had over the goldsmith's art. He became fascinated with the technique of granulation. This is a goldsmithing technique whereby small gold spheres are applied to a gold sheet. In ancient examples, the balls are impossibly small. To Alessandro's young mind, he wondered, how did they do that? And he made it his mission to figure it out. The Castellani had a shop in Rome where they had sold both ancient treasures and contemporary jewelry imported from Paris. But by the mid-19th century, they pioneered a style for archaeological revival jewelry. Having mastered the technique of granulation, Alessandro taught Giacinto Melillo, who ran the firm's Naples operation. In this example, the fineness of the granules disappear as they become part of the overall design, making up the hair of these cherubs and the decoration of the dove's body. These are less than an inch wide and are impossibly detailed. The late Japanese fashion designer Yohji Yamamoto described the museum as where fashion goes to die, and many believe the same is true of jewelry in the museum context. Jewelry is made to be worn, yet stored in the museum's vaults, it loses its context. As I think about adding works of art to the collection and animating them in the exhibition space, this is very much on my mind. Right now, I'm working on an exhibition called Dress Up, the Theater of Jewelry, which brings together clothing, jewelry, and photography to consider the way style is created and communicated. This will be a challenge. Those exhibitions that have successfully brought jewelry and fashion together have considered the look of a single designer, where the two were conceived of and shown together. For examples here, the American fashion designer Pauline Trégère and the New York jeweler Schreiner worked together, and their clothing and jewelry was often shown together in magazines like Vogue. But in this exhibition, in addition to these design partnerships, I'm interested in showing how individuals combine clothing and jewelry to create a look. It will consider a more democratic jewelry that's made of glass and plastic, to consider how media and culture aid in creating a fantasy that individuals seek to create in daily practice as they get dressed. How can a curator recreate this and bring these objects to life? In the case of this photograph by Man Ray, you can see the way Nancy Cunard famously stacked bracelets from her wrists to her elbows. Individually, these objects are far less interesting than they are when they're seen here together on the body. This is a curatorial challenge, one that requires creative thought. There have been a number of recent exhibitions that have beautifully added the body to the display, and here I share two of those. On the left is an example from the Metropolitan Museum's Jewelry, the Body Transformed exhibition back in 2018, and on the right, the just-closed Cartier and Islamic art exhibition at the Dallas Museum of Art, where they created a mount where a neck form rises from the deck to lay on the neck, successfully animating how it would have looked on the body. How someone wears jewelry is central to understanding the work of art. Bringing in photography and portraiture into an exhibition space is one way to show how these jewels lived out in the world, and creative mount making is another. I'm in the process of choosing about 200 highlights from the MFA's extensive collection of 22,000 objects to go on view in the Jewelry Gallery in 2024. The bar is high. Objects need to be beautiful, innovative, interesting, and also meet a host of other criteria that, if done successfully, most visitors don't even think about. Every consideration is being made. Light levels, materials, conservation needs, how things are grouped together, what the mounts will look like, and on and on. Jewelry is intimate. It's small. How do you make a brooch like this, significant in its own right and large for a jewel, come to life? Storytelling. The objects in the collection tell many stories. The story I choose to tell with this object varies depending on the context. In this new space, this gemstone will be the focal point. But even at 60 carats, looking like a big juicy gumdrop, its intimate scale will influence how it's seen and thought about when it's surrounded by other magnificent treasures. This is a 60-carat emerald. It was mined in the 17th century in Colombia. It was carved in India, where it was likely set into a Mughal jewel, and then later reset by the American fabricator Oscar Heyman Brothers and retailed by Marcus & Company around 1929, when it was purchased by the heiress Marjorie Merriweather Post as something she might wear to her formal presentation at the court of St. James. She opted for Cartier instead. But she loved this brooch, and there are many images of her wearing it during her lifetime. It is simultaneously a highlight of our Islamic collection and a highlight of our jewelry collection. In planning an exhibition, nothing is impossible, but there are many considerations. The team considers the conditions of an object, the materials, and its light sensitivity, among other things, and the things that are lost by locking it in a case. Noticeably absent from the list will be this headdress that's fragile condition and use of light-sensitive silk and kingfisher feathers precludes it from long-term display. The grandeur of the Chinese phoenix crown is seen here in its 19th century embodiment, but similar objects date back as far as the Ming Dynasty. This example has a curved front and a flat crown. The base is black silk satin lattice work, patterned with blue swirling clouds and waves, formed from feathers applied to a gold base. The fragility is evident where the feathers have worn away to display the gilt metal beneath. The radiant blue feather waves and clouds are surrounded by flowers, butterflies, bats, and 2 phoenixes, all of which are accented with feathers and semi-precious stones. On the front is a fringe of stones and seed pearls. This small bicycle brooch by the English firm Streeter & Company Limited was made around 1895, and it will be on view in the gallery, but visitors will not be able to enjoy what makes this brooch particularly charming. The design of this object coincided with the cycling craze that swept through America, Britain, and Europe during the 1890s. At the height of the women's suffrage movement, the bike was seen as a symbol of independence. Specifically, this brooch is a bicycle design known as the diamond frame machine bicycle. The brooch has several movable parts. The wheels spin, the pedals turn, the fine bicycle chain turns the rear wheel when advanced. Of course, in a museum case, it sits motionless. Nor will visitors realize the true power of this large-scale necklace by the Cuban-born New York artist Art Smith. A pioneer in the American studio jewelry movement, he was intensely interested in music and dance. So much so that this is called the Ellington necklace in honor of the musician Duke Ellington. In this necklace, and in so many of Smith's designs, there are open areas where the body is needed to complete the object. Visitors will not see, shining through these negative spaces, his masterful design, where the body was an integral part of that design. Instead, there's an element of imagination at play for visitors to the museum. And as a curator, I have to help in creating an environment that shares details to contextualize the works of art, but also leaves room to dream, to imagine. To understand these objects, their scale, their intimacy, their creativity, you need to be with them. How it's made, how it's worn, how it's understood. With these concepts in mind, I came across the work of Wallace Chan. Back in 2015, I read the New York Times article, "The Stone is Me." It was my first introduction to Wallace Chan and his work, and it felt like an impossibility that I might one day meet this great master. Little did I realize that just a few months later, I would have the chance to meet him at the European Fine Art Fair in Maastricht and to see and handle his work. Looking in the cases at these enormous and innovative objects, I remember thinking, these are art objects, right? People don't wear these. As a jewelry curator, I usually have to think about how to make a small thing have a great presence and how to gather a group around a small case to share something extraordinary, even if its size is diminutive. Mr. Chan's jewels were large-scale paintings. From a museum standpoint, these designs were extraordinary to me on a number of levels. Their creativity and craftsmanship was mind-boggling, and their scale was such that people could see and understand their extraordinary nature in a way that's so often challenged by the small size of jewelry. When I asked the question, I could not imagine the avant-garde collector who would have worn these. And furthermore, I could not understand how these large-scale pieces were lightweight enough that they wouldn't disturb the garment they were being pinned to. In my naive question, Mr. Chan shared that every night there are parties in Hong Kong and elsewhere where these jewels are worn. Then he invited me to handle his work. This was a moment of realization when I saw how the use of titanium transformed what was possible. Most people would spend their lifetime working on any single one of the many innovations that Mr. Chan has introduced, mastering new ways of stone cutting and carving, setting stones within stones, creating porcelain that is as strong as steel. But Mr. Chan just keeps going, pushing boundaries with his curiosity. His butterfly brooches are layered and nuanced in their design, a portal to understanding Chan and his complex work. Close looking is required. At first glance, all the jewelry I've shared with you tonight could be read as simple. It's from a deeper understanding and a curiosity that more can be gained, more can be understood. I'm most interested in thinking about these being worn and the way they act as the flying colors that Mr. Chan recalls from his childhood, but also the way they animate when worn. They move, they fly. At a distance, that's one way to appreciate them. But you can also look close up, and I'm interested in the way the colors and the materials come together, the combination of metals and gemstones, and the contrasts, the opacity and the translucency that are both at play, the reflection of light and the enormous scale. Every angle offers something new. But as a curator, thinking about my own creative practice, seeing these works makes me excited to think about the juxtapositions that could be made within a collection like the MFA's. The 21st century butterfly is enriched by being considered alongside design drawings and works of art like these two enamel butterfly brooches by Carlo Giuliano. Making these jewels come alive in the museum setting is a creative joy. This is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we can learn and share about materials in the museum context, and how adjacencies can create a deeper meaning that helps to understand these works of art in both historical and contemporary context. Thank you.